As a womb worker and fertility specialist, I wanted to record a podcast that could expand my followers' understanding that fertility exists within a broader spectrum of being a woman on this planet, of connection to the feminine and to the earth and to ourselves. This podcast is not just for women who want to get pregnant. This is for any woman or any person really who wants to be more connected to their life force, to that vital energy that flows through them. And whether we choose to use that to create babies or art or relationships or music, that connection is our birthright as humans on this planet. So I plan to use this podcast to discuss everything that I see as related to our fertility, to our life force, sex and pleasure and passion and joy and astrology and divine female archetypes and the moon and our wombs and everything else that I could think of. And hopefully you'll join in and let me know what you think. I've come to recognize that while this is a podcast about all of those things, ultimately it's a podcast about connection and relationship. Our relationship with spirit, with ourselves, with our bodies, with the earth, and with each other. Many of you know me through my fertility practice. You might be an old patient of Ariel's Apothecary, which I had for 10 years in Hoboken, New Jersey. Or you might know me through Wisdom of the Womb, or the soon to launch Moon Mother Botanicals, which I'm very excited about, or the Fertile Mama Fertility Fix. My mind has changed a bit about fertility. When I used to practice at my fertility acupuncture center, I worked a lot with functional medicine. I worked with all the reproductive endocrinologists in the area, IRMS and reproductive medical associates. And, I really kind of prided myself on being able to read all the charts and look at all the numbers and understand everything. And I looked at fertility, even though I was working with the body and doing acupuncture, I was really looking at what are the numbers saying? What are your hormone levels saying? And I think there's a place for that. And I think that's valid and important, but I have since learned to view fertility, or more accurately, infertility, as just a symptom of kind of being a woman on this planet. I see our fertility and our connection to our fertility as our birthright. Our connection to the power of our wombs, not like the power that's kind of been portrayed for us for the last 3,000 years of power over, but our power as women to feel and connect. And I, since moving to Colorado 5 years ago, I've really been kind of shifting my focus and doing womb journeys and exploring all of the trauma that we hold in our wombs, sometimes transgenerational trauma, not even from our own lifespan. Our fertility is not necessarily just our desire to have babies. And that's why this podcast is really about everyone. Our connection to our fertility is our connection to our life force, our capacity to create art or books or poetry or magic. And so that is what this podcast is about. It's about our connection to our life force as women, but this is not just necessarily for women. I hope that more and more men will watch this and be interested in this. And I do intend to have some male guests. And it's important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I will talk about, or some of the things I will say when I talk about the feminine. Obviously, this is a podcast about the feminine. I kind of see the feminine and the masculine in terms of yin and yang. My background is in Chinese medicine. So yin energy tends to be more identified as the qualities that we've associated with the feminine: soft, flowing, receptive. Whereas yang qualities are qualities we've associated more with the masculine, right? Phallic, driving, penetrating, forceful, energized, right? It's like the sun versus the water, the sun versus the ocean, the sun versus the moon, yin and yang. So it's important when I talk about the feminine and the masculine to really be clear that I'm not talking about female and male, right? I believe that the feminine and the masculine need to be living fluidly within all of us, each of us, in relationship with each other for us to be whole, right? So within me, as a female-bodied woman, identify as women, I still have a lot of masculine energy within me. I'm an Aries, I'm fiery, I have that yang drive, but I also have within me a lot of the feminine. I have a Cancer rising. So, it's important to note that while I understand that gender exists, I believe it to exist on a spectrum. And when we are so rigid, I think the reason we're at where we're at is because we've been so rigidly determining what qualities are acceptable and appropriate within certain genders. If we allowed for bodies born as male gendered to experience and express both female and masculine, feminine and masculine qualities, we'd have a much more comfortable experience of our body. That when I talk about the feminine, I'm talking about the divine feminine qualities as kind of characterized within different archetypes of different archetypal goddesses. And I'll have some speakers on who talk about that a lot more kind of poetically than I do. And I also have a desire to really connect with some men who are connected to their divine masculine energy, which I feel like our patriarchal structures have not really allowed for, right? We have kind of like stereotypes, like caricatures of male and caricatures of female, and they're kind of performative, and it's kind of become like the performance of being female, the performance of being male. So what I want to talk about in this podcast is really like embodying ourselves, as who we are in this life. And yes, this might be more suited for women who are looking to get in touch more with their inner feminine. For me, I was raised in the 80s, very driven and, right outside of New York City. So a lot of like value placed on productivity and external kind of success and money and wealth. And, those were the qualities that I thought I was meant to strive for. I had a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't really recognize the value in that. I think because our society didn't really recognize the value in that. Now I do. I'm grateful that my mom was home and that she was loving, but she was not valued by our culture. And I know that she suffered the consequences of that. I feel like it was important for me to see my beautiful, loving mother as kind of unfulfilled and depressed and not validated and not seen in her fullness as a woman by a culture that didn't really value the feminine. So that's in part what I work with my patients, is recognizing all of the ways that they're different parts, their feminine and their masculine, their internal feminine and masculine are not in communication with each other. So we talk about that. What does our feminine look like? I grew up with a very, very undervalued feminine, which kind of manifested as me being a chronic overachiever. Like I was 29 and pregnant when I opened my wellness center. So like, didn't really let myself rest, felt guilty when I did need to rest or want to rest. I kind of scheduled in my yoga class because I knew that was good for me. And I was also like in the healing arts, like I am a healer. And to still be like that way, it's not like I was a lawyer or an accountant, I was a healer, and I still was not strongly identified with my yin. My value as a woman, like that part of me didn't feel powerful. Now I recognize how powerful it is. And that's part of the reason that I want to share this podcast with you, is to really introduce you to women who are connected to their power as women, Again, not like power over. I believe that our power as women is to really be like deeply embodied and connected from that place of like oceanic flow, where we can be powerful and fierce, but also deeply relating to and deeply connected to. What happens with this unrelated masculine is that it becomes like power over. And we see that as happening in our earth, right? Where we're just like drilling and taking, and our earth is on fire, and still we're just like going. So this podcast is about ecofeminism, recognizing that our planet is suffering for the same reason that the humans on it are suffering, because we're not relating to the feeling aspect of it. We're not relating to the earth as a sentient being. And often we're not relating to ourselves or others as feeling beings. We feel shamed for when we feel too much or too sensitive, rather than recognizing that maybe our capacity to feel is like our magic. And I think that's part of what connecting with our wholeness as humans, but I'm going to say as women, because being on a woman on this planet for the past 3,000 years has not been supportive of our wholeness, right? Women who are connected to their magic were killed. Women who did not abide by Christian ideals were killed. And so the magic was kind of snuffed out of us. Men who didn't abide by those ideals were killed too, by the way. Men and indigenous cultures who connected deeply to the earth as magical were wiped out. In terms of what I do now, I help many, many women get pregnant. But my goal ultimately for them is not to have babies. I mean, if that's their goal, then that's what I support. But my ultimate goal is to help women feel more connected to their wombs, to their cycles, to their experience on this earth as cyclical beings, right? Cycling with the moon. Recognizing how the energies that live in our body are different based on different moon phases, based on where we are in our cycle. Recognizing that our energy gets to be different when we're developing follicles versus when we're ovulating. And whether or not we're trying to get pregnant, it's important to understand our cycles. It's also important for me to say that so much of this learning, so much of this knowing, so much of this paying attention to our cycle is what helped us for thousands of years prevent pregnancy. So the same dynamics, the same understanding, the same connection that helps us understand what we need to understand so that we can get pregnant is what helped us prevent pregnancy. And I believe it was intentional and purposeful that that was taken away from us, because a woman who is in control of, I don't like to say control of because that feels like control over, but in deep relationship to her body so that she can decide when she wants to birth life and when she doesn't, that is a powerful fucking woman. So these are all topics that are near and dear to my heart. I also intend to talk a lot about the commodification of our bodies. You know, the beauty industry, the diet industry, I call them the beauty industrial complex and the diet industrial complex. They're possible, they exist, they only work, they only function when women detest our bodies, when women feel not enough, when fat is feared, when aging is feared. We'll talk about what it means to be a wise woman, a crone, an elder, what it means to feel good in our bodies, what it means to be okay with being different. with not fitting into the stereotypical norm, the very, very like small box that has been identified as acceptable and desirable. What happens when we refuse to fit into that box? Ultimately, I hope that this is a podcast about empowerment and embodiment for everyone, maybe especially women, but maybe just everybody. Maybe for us all to just be okay with how we're showing up in the world, and to recognize that this world needs more of us who are just going to show up as authentically and weirdly and powerfully as possible. So I'm so looking forward to connecting with you. I'm so grateful to you for being here. I'm so excited to share all the freaking magical guests and speakers I have to share with you. And I'm excited to show up for you myself, to be too much and too loud and also really vulnerable and shy and awkward. I'm excited to connect with you. So thank you so much for joining this kind of unorganized intro episode. And I'm really looking forward to some future connecting with you guys. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more like it, be sure to subscribe, and I hope you'll rate and review as well. To learn more about how to connect with and explore your fertility, visit wisdomofthewomb.online.com and learn more about my fertility enhancing 12-week program at fertilelikeamother.com. Thanks so much for joining.